Sonoma County on the Sonoma County Master Gardeners YouTube channel, and we want to make it available to other people. I have an announcement to make briefly in Spanish, and then I'll make it in English. Lamentablemente, debido a dificultades técnicas, no podremos ofrecer este foro con subtítulos en español. Le pedimos mil disculpas si se registró esperando subtítulos en español. Gracias por su interés y estamos buscando cómo resolver las dificultades. So unfortunately, because of technical difficulties, we're not able to offer this workshop with simultaneous Spanish captions, which we had thought we could. We're really sorry if you registered hoping for a Spanish translation. Thank you for your interest. We're working on resolving those technical difficulties. So welcome if you're just coming in. And I want to let people know, and then I'll say it one more time when we're in the middle of the first presentation, that we are going to be using the Q&A function. For some people, it's a little question mark as part of their control functions, their icons. For other people, it's in the little circle with 3 dots. But once you find it, go ahead and click on it, and then you can definitely post questions, and we'll answer as many as we can. So please don't use chat. If you're used to using chat, we really do need to manage the questions in the Q&A feature. So we're going to ask people also to leave their audio and their video off, and just reminding people who are coming in now that the talk is being recorded. And we have a lot of information, so we're going to go ahead and start. And we are going to be using the slides. So we have both a meeting function and the slides. So if you look at Toby Brown's screen at the top, you can click on that and you'll see the slides. So this is Grow More, Buy Less, Fabulous Food, Fall and Winter Gardening. And as Master Gardeners, we talk to a lot of people. And one of the things that we've noticed is that really great gardeners who are just prolific and have such success with summer gardens don't tend to do fall and winter gardening. And it's always puzzled us because there are so many benefits. So in this session, we're going to talk about how to sustainably garden for food over the fall and winter. We'll talk about advantages and disadvantages. And for a lot of people, finding space right now, which is around the time where we're going to need to start our fall and winter gardens, is challenging. So we'll address some places to look for space. We'll also talk about cool weather crops that are appropriate for our area and the decision about seeds and starts, some of which is made by the timing, but some of which is definitely your choice. And then we'll talk about climate and considerations to keep in mind as our climate warms and changes in Sonoma County. So that's what we'll be discussing. Next slide. So when we garden sustainably, we're doing a lot of really important things. We're nurturing and protecting the soil, which is so important for anything that we want to grow and also for sequestering carbon. When we use compost and organic amendments, we're feeding soil organisms, and you can actually make your own compost and recycle organic matter and benefit your soil that way. We also use mulch to cover the soil and to prevent weeds and conserve water. And there are lots of different mulches. A lot of people use wood mulch. We'll talk about some living mulches. And we also practice minimum soil disturbance. So let me just say, some people have come in that we're going to be using the Q&A feature in this Zoom meeting to ask people to put their questions there. We won't be using chat for that. So if you haven't found your Q&A feature, it's a question mark inside a box, or that you can look for a circle with 3 little dots and it will be in there. So that's how we'll be asking questions. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Kim to talk about advantages and disadvantages.
This is still you.
When we garden food sustainably, right. So the other part of sustainable food gardening is planting the right plant in the right place at the right time so that it will do well. When we garden sustainably, we try to include crops that attract good insects, especially pollinators, but also sometimes predators that eat the insects that are also eating what we want. And we definitely avoid using synthetics such as fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides. Those are all very important sustainable gardening practices. And thanks for the reminder. Okay, now it's Kim's turn.
So fall gardening has a variety of advantages, and the three top ones are here on the bulleted list on your slide. And you can see that Sue Lovelace, who's one of our presenters today, has taken this lovely picture of chard in her garden. And if you notice in this photograph that things are intercropped, and she's going to talk about that a little bit later, but the benefits that we have are the requirement for less irrigation. We are very hopeful that we will have a regular rainfall. The days become shorter and cooler. We know that today is not particularly a good example of that, but overall, we're going to be having days that will allow us to reduce the water that we use on our crops, and we need to check that. As the days shorten, we need to make sure we don't overwater, and so it's really a good idea to make sure that you use a water meter that you can purchase, and to make sure about the moisture level in your soil. Our other advantage is that we have less pests and weeds. Pests tend to be the most active in the summer. That's when there's a lot of they're going through their growing cycle. They're laying eggs. They're hatching. They're reproducing like crazy. But come the fall, when the weather cools, that tends to reduce substantially, which makes a lot easier for us to garden, and we're not fighting off the pests so much, trying to figure out ways to intervene to keep our crops for ourselves. I mean, they like to eat what we eat. So in a way, that's a good thing. We know that we're eating the right things if they like them too, but the competition is less steep for us, which is great. And of course, then the weeds don't germinate because those seeds are also sleeping. And we have that advantage. We have many weeds require warmer soil to germinate. So as the soil cools, those seeds are dormant. The other really huge benefit of fall gardening is the nutrient dense crops that you're able to raise. There's many measurements for nutrient capacity of crops, and the crops that are generated in the fall and winter have the highest nutrient content of any crop. And we're talking particularly about your mustards, your turnips, collards, collard greens, kale, watercress, spinach, broccoli. All of these things that many of us really enjoy in the winter are the ones that have the highest nutrient value. You can even grow chard. Chard doesn't like a freeze, but overall it's pretty hardy. Next slide, please. There are challenges. I'm not going to come across like it's all a panacea, because there are things that you're going to have to deal with. One of the things is space availability, and a lot of times people don't get into fall gardening because they say, well, I don't have any place to plant my seeds. I got too much stuff in the ground. So a couple of the other presenters are going to talk about how you can work with that. And the planting challenges are that, for instance, like a day like today, when you have this sort of excessive heat and you've put seeds in the ground, hoping, because there's certain crops that don't like to be started outside of the earth. They would prefer to be right in the soil when they begin. And so some of those might tend to struggle. So how do you deal with that? And there's a lot of strategies you can use to help you with that. And then, of course, with the unpredictable climate and the changes we're experiencing, then you have this frost, an early frost or a freeze, and you're thinking to yourself, well, gosh, how do I mitigate all of that? Well, there's plenty of strategies to help you do that in it, and we're going to share those with you today. So the timing for planting can be a little tricky, but if you use things like that'll help protect the soil from excessive heat, using shade cloth, etc., planting, intercropping things with one another that'll help shade one another as they're growing, you're going to have a lot of success. That's it. Thank you.
So anyone with questions, we're asking, I know some people have just come in, that you put them into the Q&A box. Some people will find it in a circle with 3 dots. Other people will have it as a little question mark in a box. And it's a large group, so that's how we're going to manage the questions. So we'll just wait for a breath here to see if anybody has a question. If they do, but they don't get it in here quickly, then we'll just answer it next time we pause.
Leah, it looks like Gina Osbeck has a raised hand.
Okay. So
Do you want to mute yourself, Gina? Unmute yourself.
So Gina, I'm going to ask that you put the question or the comment in the Q&A box. Okay. Are you going to tell us what to plant for the fall? Yes. In the Central Coast. Well, we're in Sonoma County, so we'll talk about what's appropriate for here. And so let's go ahead to the next presentation. People are putting some things in the Q&A box, so that's great. And Sue is going next.
All righty. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming on a very warm day. And as unlikely as it seems, we can start looking for space in our garden. It can be challenging, though. Even with the best laid plans for succession planting, the garden can get very full. When you succession plant, you continue to grow new plants as old plants are finished or finishing. Succession planting can occur in the same growing season, like seeding bush beans at different times to get a continuous crop, or starting the next season's planting as the current one is finishing. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. The idea is to keep growing and eating from your garden as much and as long as possible. So right now, there may be spaces in your garden to plant in or to include in next year's plan. Understand that the space does not have to be large to start plants. I don't know if you can see me, but this is a little fall planting, so it does not take much space. So the practice of no-till or limited soil disturbance, as was addressed or at least pointed to in our sustainability features, allows us to mound a bit of new compost where we want to plant, then dig a hole in the center of it to accommodate each plant. As you put in the plants, some of the compost will fall in the hole, some will stay on the surface of the ground to be mulch. And in both cases, the plant and the soil get replenished. So containers like wine barrels, troughs, galvanized cans, or large pots can help with successive plantings. They can be areas to leave open for the next season, or they can be included in your succession plan. I'll show you more of this later. So uppotting or transplanting to a larger pot to wait for open spaces might be an option. If you have a 4-inch pot, a seedling in a 4-inch pot, you may want to uppot in a gallon and have it grow there until a space opens in your garden. I do that a lot with tomatoes. So next slide, please. So spaces next to vertically grown vegetables like the cukes on the left and the squash on the right are great spots for new seedlings or seeds. If you look at the photo on the left, that is a cucumber that's going up a trellis. And to its left, I had planted Romanesco cauliflower about 3 weeks to a month ago. I, of course, protect it because Little varmints love to, snails and slugs love little seedlings. Now the cucumber itself provides a bit of shade for that seedling. And if you look on the right, that is a pumpkin or a squash growing up a trellis. And on either side of those, on one side would be radishes and on the other side would be beets. So you're kind of thinking ahead and looking for that empty space. So I wanted to say a little bit about short season crops, meaning those with less days to mature, like greens, radishes, beets, and peas. They are table ready in the fall and may fit in, like the radishes do in the photo on the right, to existing plants. Now the radishes, you could probably get 2 or 3 plantings. They're only 21 days to maturity. And the beets on the other side are like 55 days, and they grow slower in the cold weather. So probably if you do get beets in the fall, you know, it will be a few months. Okay, so overwintering crops like broccoli, kale, cauliflower, garlic, and cabbage will take longer to grow and form strong roots. This is going to be addressed later, but I'm mentioning it because around the first frost, they will slow way down and stop growing in winter. And then in spring, they'll start growing again. And so there's lots of good options here. So next slide, please.
Sue, could I ask you to move your papers down so we can see your beautiful face?
Oh, I didn't see the papers.
Yeah,
You see them now?
I can see you. No paper.
Wait, sorry about that. Yeah, I didn't realize that because I can't see my picture, so I don't know what I'm seeing. Okay, so containers are valuable contributors to space in the garden. The squash in the wine barrel flowed over the edge of the wine barrel, and now I, with my sharp eyes, saw that I could put in some lettuce and cilantro in that space. And then the squash shades the lettuce and the cilantro. And if you look at the bush beans and the butternut squash in the trough picture, the bush beans are basically done. I'm just waiting for them to dry, and then I will harvest. The squash will stay there and mature. And then after the beans come out, and I will cut them at ground level or at the level of the soil so that I leave the roots in the ground, because bean roots are very healthy. All roots to plants are healthy, but especially beans. And there'll be plenty of room for new fall starts. Now the broccoli seeds at the bottom, I love galvanized containers for direct seeding. The little chard that's shown at the top of the galvanized can planted itself. But broccoli, I started by seed. They're growing pretty well now. One of them will probably come out and go in a space when the space is available, and the other one will continue to grow. That chard will get larger and it will begin to help shade those new seedlings. Okay, so a few points. So plant vertical when you can. Take advantage of that space to plant new starts or seeds. Protect new small seedlings or seeds with a cover, like those baskets that are there. Those are great for little protectants. You can even add little shade cloth over it if it gets too hot. Use the shade of summer plants to take the heat stress off of newbies. And consider this space in your next summer's plans. A trellis can be used over the seasons, like the pumpkins that were growing up the trellis could house peas pretty soon. And then a pea trellis could be a tomato trellis later on. Plant some veggies to eat in the fall and those that will overwinter and grow again in the spring. Always think ahead to the next season and then record that in a journal or in your notes. You'll refer to them, I promise you. Okay, thank you. And if there's any questions, I'll be glad to take them.
You do have two people who want to know where you get those cute little galvanized baskets.
Well, I will just say I got them locally at a store that you pay about $1.25.
So we're not really allowed to recommend specific stores
Right.
as master gardeners. So that's why Sue is telling you, giving you a hint.
And you could also use food tents, you know, those that you place over food at a picnic. Those are great too. And of course, row covers are also handy. So yeah, protect those young plants as they're growing.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions. If you're just coming in, we're using the Q&A feature, which is a little box with a question mark, or maybe it's a circle with 3 dots that you have to press, and then your Q&A will come up, and we'll move on. So Karen is going to talk about what to grow.
Okay, just waiting for my slide to come up. There we go.
Sorry.
Yeah, so the big question, what shall I plant? And it does seem a little bit odd to be talking today about cool weather crops when it might be the hottest day of the summer, but this is the time. So think about, when you're thinking about what to grow, the first thing to think about is, what do I eat? What does my family eat? Because there's no need to grow things that nobody's going to eat. And they might look super cute in the garden center, but if you're not going to eat it, it's probably not worth the water. So think about what you would like to eat. 2 things to know about are that there's kind of some terms that will be coming through now: cold hardy and semi-hardy. And cold hardy means that these items can withstand heavy frost and air temperatures below 28 degrees. This is being recorded and you'll be able to see these slides afterwards, so you don't need to be writing down, you can just listen. So there's that list of cold hardy. They'll withstand air temperature below 28 degrees. And then there's the semi-hardy, which would tolerate light frost and air temperatures between 28 and 32 degrees. So they need a little bit more protection. If you have these in the ground and a heavy frost is predicted, then you'll want to cover them with something. So that's a quick summary of what, mainly what's available to grow in the fall and winter season. Next slide. Another few terms to know. One is day length, and plants need 10 hours of sunlight a day to grow. And between November 18th and January 23rd in Sonoma County, we have less than 10 hours of sunlight. So that's the reason that we're planting now, because the plants need to have enough time to get big enough to withstand the winter. So they'll grow nicely until around the middle of November. Then they're going to slow or even stop growing, and they'll just hang in there until kind of middle of January, when we have 10 hours again. So you want to have them as, if you put them in, you know, just before the middle of November, they won't have a chance to grow enough to withstand that winter. So that's day length. First frost and freeze date. We have links for these dates. The last couple of slides have a lot of links. In Sonoma County, well, in Santa Rosa City, the average first frost is November 17th, around there. And then freezing a little bit after that. But different areas of Sonoma County are different, which is why we always direct people to the link to the calendar of all the places and the frost and freeze dates. So that's an important thing to know. Again, it needs to be decently big to go into that. And then the other 2 terms are germination and days to maturity. Germination, it's the time between when you put the seed in the soil and when you see something green and cute popping up out of the soil. So that's the germination time. And then the days to maturity are the number of days from germination all the way to harvest. So it's in the fall especially, it's good to look at the seed packet and see how many days to maturity and do I have enough time. Also on the seed packets, the days to maturity are for spring planting. And so for the fall, because it's cooler, you need to add 7 to 14 days to that number on the packet to get more of an idea of fall days to maturity. Next slide. So here is another list. Again, there's a link to this on one of the last slides, so don't worry about writing it all down. But what I do want to do is tell you a little bit about how to read this chart. It has a lovely list of most of the fall and winter crops on the left-hand side. If you look down the list, sort of the bottom half is all you'll see: July, August, August to September, and many of them are in August. So that's why we're doing this right now. So it gives a planting window, and then the third column, it has either a C, a D, a T, some combination of those. The C means it's a cool weather crop. That means it's either early spring, like Swiss chard at the top. You can plant it in February, or you can plant it all the way through till August. So it can be a spring or a fall crop. But cool means it's in a cool season. And the D means direct sow. That means you're going to put a seed in the soil. And the T means transplant, which means you're going to put a little started something in the soil. So some things you can do either, like lettuce. You can see it has a D and a T. The Swiss chard right above only has a D, so it's recommended to plant that from seed. And then some things like the asparagus has a T. You're going to transplant a little start of that. Now, this isn't 100%. For example, you can buy Swiss chard starts from the nursery and plant those just fine. But it's just giving you an idea of maybe what's optimal. The next line is spacing, which I think can be followed a little bit more loosely, because you can plant quite densely and try things out, see how they grow. Find a little pocket like Sue talked about of space and just give it a go. Sometimes those little seedlings, especially right now, would love to be crowded up to something that gives them some shade. Then the next column gives days to maturity, and you can see asparagus is 2 to 4 years. So if you are on a shorter time frame, don't plant it. And some things like spinach is under 2 months. Some things like carrots are almost 4 months. So days to maturity are really important to look at and just have some sense of how soon am I going to expect this thing. And then it gives you some little tips on harvest. But I would say again, please grow what your family and you will eat. It's so easy to get tempted at the nursery, and we pay for water, and water's scarce. So really to make gardening food gardening at any time of year most efficient, really think about what you'll eat and how much of it you'll eat. Also, don't rely on the store to tell you what to plant right now. For example, I was in a nursery and there's tons of basil for sale. That's not a cool weather crop. It'll last a little bit more, but that's not one that's going to go through the winter. So make sure you read your list before you head to the nursery. Next slide. The ending to this, because I'm not going to go down all the lists, you can read the lists afterwards, but if you don't plant a winter crop of something and you have soil that's going to be unplanted, think about planting a cover crop. It's not essential. If you're a beginning gardener, don't worry. But if you have some space and you have the mental space to think about this and do it, we highly recommend it. It is great for the soil. The cover crops, you can see they add nitrogen to the soil. The roots that go down through the soil improve the structure of the soil and the water retention. Things that bloom will support beneficial insects. It gives you, if you ever heard about crop rotation, not to plant the same thing in the same place twice, this gives you one more rotation. I planted beans here right now. I'm going to plant fava beans next, and then I can plant something else in the spring. So it gives me a little rotation. It helps reduce soil washing off, which is the erosion control, which is a big deal now that we have these very heavy rains. We've been doing some re-landscaping in our garden because of the heavy rain that we have. And you can, cover crop can be a living mulch, and then you cut it down and it becomes another layer of mulch. And then there's a list at the bottom of some of the common cover crops, which may be harder to find in somewhere like a big box store, but easy to find in a farm supply type store. So look for those there. You could ask for them if you aren't seeing them. I know farm supply store in Sebastopol sells them in bulk. You can just get a little paper bag and take a scoop. So you don't have to buy them in bulk. Right, next slide for Toby.
Okay.
Questions?
So Leah, are there questions for Karen?
One question that hasn't been answered is how often should we grow a cover crop? Every year, every few years, Karen?
I tend to put a cover crop in when I can. So I'm just a home gardener. I'm not a farmer who's got a schedule. But if I've taken out a summer crop and I have empty space that I'm not going to plant anything else, I will put a cover crop, just some seeds down there. I usually put fava beans because I can get them for free, and that's my cover crop. So it really is when you have space and time to do it.
And then one other question, do we need to cover seedlings during a freeze or frost? Which I answered, but if somebody else wants to answer that again.
Yes, I mean, you can reference back the cold hardy and semi-hardy slide, but seedlings in general do like a little protection. They're only babies. So if you can put, I mean, it could be as simple as I have a clothes rack outside. I could just stand the clothes rack over it and throw a sheet over that. Could be a dining room chair with a sheet over it. You can buy hoops and frost cloth, but you really don't have to go buy anything. A cardboard box, upside down cardboard box, as long as you remember to uncover it in the morning, because it will want some light when the daytime comes. But if it's going to be a frost overnight, there's lots of things around the house that you could use to cover.
And then one more question that I answered, but a second opinion is always good. Sally asked, do we plant in our garden beds year round, or do you ever rotate where you plant to allow for cover crops to help you nourish the soil for the next year round garden plants?
Yes. Now, rotation is harder in the home garden because we have less space, especially if, I'm on just a little city lot. So I have less ability to rotate crops. And if I cannot rotate, so say I'm planting tomatoes in a certain bed, and I know next summer I will also be planting tomatoes there because that's my only space, I make sure I put a cover crop in, because it does give that one rotation, something different, something that nourishes the soil, and then I might plant tomatoes there again next summer. So some of it does depend on space. There is best practice, which would be to rotate and to plant a cover crop in between. Not every crop, but say, 3 years, and then the 4th year is a cover crop. But as home gardeners, we tend to be a little tighter on space. And that means the cover crop, when it does come, is important, and to add compost to your soil before each planting. So in the spring, add compost. In the fall, add compost, so that you're just improving the soil so it doesn't become depleted.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's go on to Toby. And just a reminder, a few people have joined recently. We're using the Q&A box for questions. All right, Toby.
Okay, so I am going to talk to you about seeds versus starts. So the advantage of start is a little baby plant, is it has better pest resistance. as soon as you have a little sprout coming up, if you've planted a seed, what happens is that any insects that are out, it looks perfect to them and they just want to eat it. So, if you have a little bit bigger plant, it resists just a little bit better. You can jumpstart your growing season. It's great. You have those ready. You can go to the farm store or a big box store and buy some of these starts, and they're all ready to go. So you have fewer plants needed for your desired yield, which means that, when you're sowing your seeds, if you buy a whole packet of seeds and you plant 6 or 7, you are planting for a few backups too. So you're seeding for a few backups just in case those don't make it. But here when you're buying them, you can go through and say, wow, okay, I need 6. I take a 6-pack of that. And if you only want 3, you can save a few and plant them in a little spot, just like Sue was telling you about, just in case something happens to the start. The perennials are only planted once. If you want to grow something like rhubarb or asparagus, you need to go through and do a start primarily on those. Artichokes, you can go through. Artichokes are perennials. You can start those from seed, and they really are pretty easy, but they, keep coming. And this sort of helps you with the garden space, because with a lot of this, if you look at our chart, which I highly recommend you do, and look through, just like Karen was telling you about, days to maturity. When you put those little starts in the ground, you don't really have to think about it until about the beginning of September. And so, then you don't have as many, maybe as many tomatoes and peppers that are still in the ground. And these little starts will stand up to lower soil temperatures, just like we were talking about. You wouldn't need to cover as much as you would a seed. So as far as seeds go, I am really a seed sower. I love to buy seeds. I love to look through seed catalogs. The advantage of starting your own seeds is that you have just a wealth of different types of, like asparagus or not asparagus, of broccoli. And so you can decide what you want rather than just buying what they have at the nursery. So advantages of seeds. Some seeds don't transplant well. Like, for instance, carrots. Carrots are really hard. I mean, compared to a lot of the fall plants. They just take a long time, and you're starting them in, if you'd like some carrots, in November, you need to plant them now because they take such a long time, and keep them really moist. They can't dry out until they get, pretty good size. So some things you need to direct seed. A lot of people direct seed things like beets. You don't absolutely have to, but you can go ahead and start those as well. Let's see. So you have more of an opportunity to stagger your planting too. I go through, and if I want, I can start in a little 6-pack, some broccoli, and then I can wait and do a little bit more in 2 weeks. I can have backup plants that are ready for me. And it's really cost effective that way as well, because 1 packet of seeds will give you lots and lots of vegetables. Let's see. So you want to direct seed fast germinating things like bok choy. Some of those are like the toi choy. It's like 30 days and then it's ready. So you can do it one way or another. You can stick some seeds in, you can plant some and put them in as starts. And like I said, it's less expensive, definitely. Don't get carried away though. Buy what you're going to eat, and go through and share seeds with somebody else. because a lot of the seeds don't last for a super long time. So that's another thing that you need to look up, like lettuce seeds. They don't last terribly long. So split those with somebody. If you're direct seeding, you're going to sprinkle just like they're doing here, the seeds down into the furrow. And when they come up, lots will come up right together. So you need to make sure that you go through and thin them out. And you can either pull them out, but I prefer to take scissors and clip them off. That way I don't disturb the roots, especially with something like carrots. So excuse my cat, he's meowing. So seeding does require direct contact with the soil. I had a friend one time who was a beginning gardener, and she called me and she said, how do you get those seeds to not float to the top? And I said, well, did you get the soil wet to start with? Oh, I didn't know I was supposed to do that. So wet your soil well. Make sure the seed is pressed down into the soil. You need to get it at the right soil depth. Some things need light to germinate. So you're going to need to make sure that you press them down well and only cover with a teeny tiny bit of soil, if at all. You can get that information right on the seed packet. So it'll tell you. Generally, the bigger the seed, the deeper you plant it, but always double check. You want to keep your soil consistently moist, but not sopping wet. So, and when you notice the little spray bottle there, that's a really great way to go through and water seedlings. You can spray them. You can also go through and put the water in the tray, and it'll soak it up from down below. Okay, so any questions for me?
We do. We have a number of questions. Can you recommend what kind of compost and fertilizer you like to use?
You know, we do use our own compost. We have a big garden, and we make compost in several different ways. Most of the places around we're not supposed to recommend, but there are lots of great places where you can get soil. I prefer, because we're getting large amounts, we do use our own compost, plus we need to buy some compost as well. So we go to a place that will load it into a trailer, or you can go through and bring buckets, and they will go through and they'll put it on the ground and you can load it in the bucket. There's a lot of places too where you can go and they have free compost to give out. Leah, you know some spots where they have free compost, right?
Yeah, Zero Waste Sonoma has created a whole list of places around the county, from Healdsburg to, I think there's one in Petaluma and one in Santa Rosa, that some of them you have to schedule, some of them they only offer one day a week or one day every 2 weeks, but it's free compost and it's what you are composting in your green waste can. So that's an option.
And it is really good compost. At Leah and I and Karen all volunteer at Harvest for the Hungry Garden. I'm putting our plug in on Yalupa, and we are there on Wednesday mornings. And we get Zero Waste Sonoma goes through and delivers a great big load of compost for us. And, you know, boy, I tell you, it's good stuff. And you can get that for free. So, Karen, go ahead, Leah.
One other question, and then we probably should move on just to get everything in. Somebody says she's very bad at overwatering seedlings. How to ensure that she does it right?
Well, you know what some people do is they go through and they take the tray, they get it just perfect, you know, as far as the soil, and plant their seeds, and then they weigh it. And so then you can go through, and the next day, if you have lots of seeds that you're doing, you can weigh that again and see how off it is. The other thing is you can just lift it up and tell yourself, you know, that this is definitely a lot lighter and you need to go through and water it. Also, if you're prone to doing that, I wouldn't put them in a tray that, you know, where it can't, the excess moisture doesn't leak out. So, you know, maybe something more like mesh, if you're doing it outside, would be a good thing for you.
Okay, I think we can go on. We are going to end at 6:30, which is why we're moving along. So Karen's going to handle questions, which I really appreciate. And I think it's generally acknowledged, I hope I don't have to convince you, that our climate is changing along with everyone else's. And it's happening faster and in ways that are weirder than scientists have been able to predict. It's very unpredictable. So the first kind of issue with that is this loss of predictability. What we're used to is not necessarily going to be what we get. And what we're sure about is probably going to change. What seems very likely and is already happening is that we're going to have longer summers. The summers will be longer, fall and spring will kind of elongate, but winters will be shorter generally in terms of just basic temperatures. And at the same time, it's going to be hotter year round. So some of the questions that came up in chat about my tomatoes exploded when it got to be 90 and what do I do? What about shade? Those are really relevant questions, and they're probably going to be questions we're all going to be dealing with for the rest of our gardening lives. When you have hotter year-round temperatures, you have fewer chill nights, which is important for crops like fruit and grapes. It's a great concern in those industries because some plants really need to have a certain number of nights that are at a certain temperature in order to set fruit. So some of the fruit trees that you've always relied on in your home garden may not be as productive. And or one of the other things that can happen with that is that they may bloom out of sync, i.e. early, so that the insects that we need to pollinate them are not going to be around because it's too early for them, or there will be too many insects that are going to do damage to them because things are no longer in the sync that they've traditionally been in. So we're also experiencing more extreme weather, extreme heat. I don't know if you all remember the day a couple of years ago when it was 112 in Sonoma County. That's definitely not the norm, but it may be in fact, it's very definitely going to be a situation where we see more extremely hot days. This summer is probably an exception. So it's weird, but it's happening generally. We've had the hottest years on record for the last 2 years. But heat isn't the only change that we're probably going to be seeing in Sonoma County. The rain precipitation amounts are probably not going to be too different, although they may increase somewhat, according to a lot of climate models, but the way and the timing that the rain gets delivered are really changing. And we're getting these atmospheric rivers that are dumping a lot of water, so much that the ground can't absorb it all at once. So we get flooding, either small scale in your garden or large scale. And then there's also more intense winds often because the storms are more intense. So of course, all these things are having impacts already on plants, animals, which includes insects and people. Next slide, please. So we can do a lot to protect our plants from climate events, depending on what those events are. So shade for heat and sun is important, and people on this call are already working with that, it sounds like. They're natural barriers. When you think about the orientation of your garden, where you plant the trees, if you plant them to the west and the south, you're going to shade the garden, which traditionally gardeners are like, oh no, I want the sun. But as the climate changes, that might be more desirable. If you plant them to the north and the east, you'll get morning shade from the east and not too much shade from the north. So those are all considerations. And you can definitely have natural shade barriers. But you can also put up permanent barriers. You can have shade structures. Some of them are permanent. They can also be temporary. People are already thinking about shading. Shade cloth comes in a variety from 10% to 90%. So you can experiment and see what works for your garden. For heavy rains, assuming that they're not actually flooding you out, what we found at Harvest for the Hungry is that years and years of compost has changed the soil so that it absorbs a lot more water. And so when lots of gardens are flooded and there are big puddles and you have to jump through them, at Harvest for the Hungry, because of so many years of building up the soil, it's got a really nice tilth, and the water kind of slowly drains down in a way that doesn't damage the plants and that helps recharge the aquifer. So you definitely want to mulch and build your soil in order to have that kind of natural drainage. But you might also need things like a rain garden, where the gutters in your house aim the water coming off the roof at a depressed area, and then it can kind of filter and sink down into the aquifer. And then strong winds are also an issue. As I said, plants, you don't want a solid wall, because then the wind hits it and goes up. But you want something like about a 70% wall of plants, so that some wind gets through, but it gentles down as it's coming through the plants. And built structures, same thing. You really don't want a solid wall, because that's not gonna be beneficial. Next slide. So one of the big impacts of climate change in our garden situations is that insect populations are going to change. And we humans, especially those who grow food, divide insects into beneficials, the ones we like. Generally, those are pollinators and carnivores that eat other insects that we don't like. And then those that we dislike, those are the vegetarian insects that are eating our broccoli that we don't like to share our broccoli. So what's going to happen, and it's impossible to give specifics for Sonoma County in this short video presentation, but some are going to thrive with the warmer weather, with the longer summers, shorter winters, and they're going to reproduce more. So there'll be more cycles of those insects. And the ones that are competing with us for the food, that's not good news for us. But there are going to be some probably plants that we're going to need to protect more and make sure that we're really strengthening and nourishing. Some insect species will suffer and weaken, and all around the globe, we're seeing that some species are really suffering, some are going extinct. Some of those are what we consider beneficial, some are not. That's going to be different for each species. Some will actually die out, and some will move into new places, possibly north, where it's supposedly not going to be quite as hot. Some species are just moving north or moving into other ecosystems. So there are a lot of impacts that climate is already having, that some of us are noticing on the food chains for animals. When there are fewer insects, the birds don't do as well, because birds eat insects, but also other insects eat insects. So those are populations that are going to be impacted. And then for people, the loss of pollinators and the fact that there are more pests might mean the loss of crops. So what we really want to encourage as master gardeners is that we talk to each other and tell each other what's happening in our gardens, so that we can learn from each other and really try to make sure that we're sharing information about how to adapt. So any questions?
So far, there are none in the chat, which means you did a really thorough job.
Okay, well, that's good to know. If there's anybody who didn't quite get the Q&A box, we have a few minutes for a couple of live questions, and I'm going to see if Eartha can tell us whose hand is raised, because it's harder for me to see that.
So I'll just say that there's links. The slide that you see in the next slide, there are links to many of the things we've talked about. And in the chat right now, I'm going to put a link to the demonstration gardens. We have several around the county, and they really are worth a visit. And you could probably talk to a master gardener in person and ask any question you'd like. So I'll put that in the chat.
Thank you. Karen worked hard on those links. So is there anybody who wants to just ask an in-person question instead of dealing with Q&A or chat?
And we're also on YouTube, Instagram and Facebook. So we have short video clips that, and some longer ones as well. So you may want to check that out. I'm going to move the slide to the next one. So if you want to take a picture of this one, you can go through and do that. I really recommend that you go to our webpage because we have lots of great things. And we do have a whole drop down for food gardening.
Toby, would you just leave that for one,
Oh,
leave that
sorry.
first
Okay.
link slide? Because I'd like to highlight the help desk, which is the first link. You can email a question or you can call and leave a question. It is a fantastic resource. And if I have somebody from not Sonoma County ask me something that I don't know the answer, I will say, submit a question to your county's Master Gardener help desk. Somebody answers those pretty promptly and accurately. So it is a resource that is fantastic.
We have a
People are asking where they can see this, and the YouTube page for Sonoma County Master Gardeners it won't be up immediately, but that's usually where we post things. Sorry, somebody was going to say something.
I was going to say the same, Leah, that we have a question about getting copies of the slides and also about where they can watch this.
Any other questions? Last questions. We hope that you'll do some fall and winter gardening because it's really great to have your own produce instead of having to go buy it in the middle of winter. Not seeing any other questions. Let's see if anybody has a hand up. So let's, good, people say that it's helped. And so let's thank Sue, Karen, Kim, and Toby, and Eartha for all their help getting this done. And we're so glad you came. And looks like we can end a little early. So thank you for coming, and stay tuned. We'll be doing other presentations.
Thank you.
Thank you.